Hi, and welcome to Ginger English. I'm Sarah, and today we have a B1 level podcast for you. Okay, so imagine this. It's a Friday night. Your best friend is standing right next to you, laughing, making jokes, complaining about his heavy backpack. And then you wake up in the morning and he's just gone. No note, no text, nothing. Just gone into the mountains. That's exactly what happened to Jake. And today, I'm going to tell you the full story. Because trust me, it gets a lot stranger before it gets better. So let's go back to the beginning. It's a regular Thursday evening in Denver, Colorado. Jake and his best friend, Carlos, are packing their bags for a weekend hiking trip. They've been planning this for weeks. Nothing fancy, just 2 nights in the Rocky Mountains, some fresh air, some trails, maybe a campfire. Classic guy trip, right? Jake is 32 years old. He works in IT, spends most of his week staring at a screen, and honestly, he's been looking forward to this trip more than anything else in months. Carlos is his best friend from college. They've known each other for almost 10 years. They're the kind of friends who can sit in silence for an hour and it doesn't feel weird. Comfortable. Easy. That kind of friendship. They drive up on Friday after work. The plan is simple. Park the car, hike about 5 miles in, set up camp before dark, and spend Saturday exploring the trails. Jake even downloaded an offline map just in case they lost signal. He thought of everything. Or at least, he thought he did. They reach the trailhead around 6 in the evening. The sun is still up. The air smells like pine trees and cold wind. And Jake says it felt like stepping into a completely different world. Away from the emails, away from the noise, away from everything. Just mountains and sky. They start hiking. The first couple of miles are easy, wide trail, clear path, beautiful views. Carlos is in a great mood, singing some old song under his breath, joking about how he should have packed lighter. Jake laughs. Everything is perfect. By the time they set up camp, it's getting dark fast. They eat, they talk, they sit by the fire for a while. Nothing unusual, nothing strange, and then they go to sleep. And when Jake opens his eyes the next morning, Carlos is gone. His sleeping bag is empty. His boots are missing, but his phone, his backpack, his water bottle, everything else is still there, right where he left it. Jake doesn't panic at first. He figures Carlos just went to use the bathroom or get some water from the stream nearby. He waits 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. He calls out his name. No answer. He walks around the camp in a circle. Nothing. That's when the panic starts to set in. Now, I want you to really think about this for a second. You're in the middle of the mountains, no cell signal, your friend is missing, and all of his stuff is still at camp. Like, he didn't leave, he just disappeared. Jake told me later that the first thing he felt wasn't fear. It was confusion. Pure, total confusion. Because it didn't make any sense. Carlos wasn't the kind of person to just wander off without saying anything. He was responsible, careful. He always told Jake where he was going, even if it was just to grab some wood for the fire. So Jake starts doing what any rational person would do. He checks the area around the camp. He looks for footprints in the dirt, and he finds some, heading north, away from the main trail, which is strange because there's nothing north of their campsite, no water source, no lookout point, nothing marked on the map, just trees and rocks and elevation. Jake follows the footprints for a while, maybe 15 and 20 minutes, but then the ground gets rockier and he loses the trail completely. He stops, looks around, and realizes he's now also not entirely sure which direction camp is. Okay, so now we have 2 people who might be lost. Great. Jake is smart enough not to go further. He knows the basic rule. If you're lost, stay where you are, but he also can't just stand there doing nothing while his best friend is somewhere out in those mountains. So he makes a decision. He goes back to camp, carefully, paying attention to every landmark he can find, and he grabs his whistle. 3 short blasts. The universal signal for help. He blows it once, waits, nothing. He blows it again, waits, nothing. 3rd time, and then far away, very far away, he hears something. Not a whistle back, not Carlos's voice, just a sound. Like wood cracking or maybe an animal moving through the trees. Jake stands completely still and listens. The mountains are not quiet, by the way. People always imagine nature as peaceful and silent, but it's actually full of sounds. Wind through the trees, birds, water somewhere in the distance. It's easy to hear things that aren't there, or miss things that are. He decides to wait at camp. He makes the fire bigger so it's more visible. He blows the whistle every 15 minutes. He checks his watch. It's 7:43 in the morning. By 9 o'clock, Carlos still hasn't come back. By 10, Jake is starting to think about hiking back to the car and driving to find help. But the trailhead is 5 miles away, and leaving means Carlos would come back to an empty camp and have no idea what happened. By 11, Jake hears footsteps. Real ones this time, getting closer. Jake jumps to his feet. He's staring in the direction of the sound, heart pounding, whistle in his hand. And then, through the trees, he sees a figure, moving slowly, carefully. And it's not Carlos. It's a man. Older, maybe late 60s or early 70s. Tall, wearing a worn brown jacket and heavy boots. He has a gray beard and a walking stick that looks like it was cut straight from a tree branch. He steps into the small clearing where Jake's camp is, looks around calmly, and then looks at Jake. "You're the one blowing that whistle," the man says. It's not a question. Jake says yes. He asks if the man has seen another hiker, younger, dark hair, wearing a red jacket, and the old man nods slowly, like he already knew that was coming. "He's at my cabin," the man says, "about 1.5 miles east of here. He's okay, cold, but okay." Jake feels a wave of relief so strong he almost has to sit down. Carlos is alive. He's safe. But then, almost immediately, another feeling comes. A question. A small, quiet, uncomfortable question in the back of his mind. How did this man know where to find Jake? Think about that. Carlos is at the cabin. The old man came to Jake's camp, but Jake never told anyone where he was camping. He never filed a hiking plan. A lot of people don't, honestly. He had no signal, so no GPS location was shared. So how did this stranger know exactly where to walk to find him? Jake asks. And the man gives a simple answer. He says Carlos told him. Said his friend was at camp, waiting. Gave him a general description of the area. The old man knows these mountains well. He's been living out here for over 20 years. Finding the camp wasn't hard for him. Okay, that makes sense. That's a perfectly logical explanation. And Jake tells himself to relax, to stop overthinking, to just be grateful that his friend is safe. He puts out the fire, packs the most important things into his bag, and follows the old man through the trees. The walk takes about 30 minutes, longer than 1.5 miles usually would, but the terrain is rough. No trail, just rocks and roots and steep patches of ground. The old man moves through it like it's nothing, like he's walked this exact path 1,000 times. Jake struggles to keep up. They don't talk much. Jake asks a few questions. The man's name is Harold. He moved up here after he retired. He has a small cabin where he hunts and lives mostly off the land. Simple life, quiet life. Don't you get lonely out here? Jake asks at one point. Harold doesn't answer right away. He just keeps walking. And then, after a long pause, he says, "Sometimes lonely is safer than the alternative." Jake has no idea what that means. But something about the way Harold says it makes him decide not to ask any follow-up questions. The cabin appears through the trees like something out of an old photograph. Small, wooden, with a narrow porch and a chimney pushing out a thin line of smoke. There's a pile of firewood stacked neatly along one wall, some old tools hanging near the door, and a single window with yellow light coming through it. Honestly, Jake says it looked kind of cozy, which made him feel even more confused about his own nervousness. Harold pushes the door open without knocking. It's his house, after all. And there, sitting at a small wooden table with a blanket around his shoulders and a metal cup in his hands, is Carlos. Jake almost laughs from relief. Carlos looks up, sees him, and his whole face changes. "Dude," Carlos says, "I am so sorry." And Jake just walks over and hugs him. Because what else do you do? Your best friend is alive and warm and drinking something hot in a stranger's cabin in the middle of the Colorado mountains. You hug him, obviously. They sit together while Carlos explains what happened. And the story is, honestly, kind of embarrassing in the best possible way. Carlos woke up in the middle of the night. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, he needed to use the bathroom, which, when you're camping, means walking away from camp into the dark. He grabbed his boots, grabbed his flashlight, and walked maybe 50 meters into the trees. And then the flashlight died. Just like that. Battery gone. Complete darkness. And Carlos, half asleep and disoriented, turned around to walk back to camp and went the wrong direction. He walked for what he thought was a minute or two and then realized the camp wasn't there. He called out for Jake. No answer. He kept walking, thinking he'd find the camp any second. He didn't. By the time the sun started coming up, Carlos was genuinely lost. He'd been walking in circles for hours, he was cold and tired, and he had no idea where he was. And then, right around sunrise, he literally walked into Harold's cabin. Not figuratively. He actually walked right up to the front door because in the early morning light, he thought it might be a park ranger station or something. Harold heard him outside, opened the door, took one look at this freezing, exhausted, very embarrassed young man on his porch, and said, "You'd better come in." Jake looks over at Harold, who is standing quietly near the fireplace, not really participating in the conversation, just listening. And Jake says, "Thank you," genuinely, deeply. This man took in a stranger at sunrise without any hesitation, gave him warmth, gave him food, went to find his friend. That's not nothing. That's actually remarkable. Harold just nods. "Mountains are dangerous," he says simply. "People need to look out for each other." And for a moment, everything feels okay. Resolved. Simple. Just a story about a dead flashlight and a wrong turn and a kind old man in the woods. But then Carlos puts down his cup, and he says, "Hey, Jake, there's something I need to tell you about Harold." Jake looks at him. "What do you mean?" Carlos glances toward Harold, then back at Jake and lowers his voice just slightly. "I don't think he lives out here alone." Jake stares at Carlos, then he glances at Harold, who is still standing near the fireplace, poking at the fire with a long metal rod. Not looking at them, not reacting. Jake lowers his voice too. "What do you mean, not alone?" Carlos wraps the blanket a little tighter around his shoulders and leans forward. "Okay, so here's the thing. When Harold brought me inside this morning, I was pretty out of it. Cold, tired, not really paying attention to my surroundings. I just sat down where he told me to sit and drank the tea he gave me. But after maybe 20 minutes, I started to warm up and actually look around the cabin. And that is when I noticed the photos." There are pictures on the wall, a lot of them, old ones in simple wooden frames, and most of them are of Harold, younger Harold, maybe 40 or 50 years old, with a woman and two kids, a boy and a girl, family photos, birthdays, holidays, what looks like a camping trip somewhere, normal family stuff. But then there is one photo that is different. It is more recent. You can tell by the quality of the image. And in it, Harold is standing outside this exact cabin, in front of that exact pile of firewood, with his arm around a younger man. Maybe mid-30s, dark hair, smiling. Carlos saw that photo and did not think much of it at first. Maybe a son visiting. Totally normal. But then he got up to use the bathroom. Harold pointed him to a small door at the back of the cabin. And on his way there, Carlos passed another door, a closed one. And from behind that door, he heard something, breathing, slow and steady, like someone sleeping. Carlos stopped, listened, definitely breathing. He almost knocked, but then thought, maybe it is just Harold napping before he came to find me. But Harold was right there in the main room, so whoever was breathing behind that door was someone else entirely. Carlos came back to the table, sat down, and did not say anything. Because what do you say? Hey, is there a mysterious person sleeping in your back room? He just waited. And Harold did not mention it either, not once. Jake is listening to all of this very carefully, and now he is looking around the cabin with completely different eyes. The photos on the wall. The two mugs already on the table when they arrived. Not one, two. The pair of boots near the front door that are definitely not Harold's size, they are much smaller. The extra jacket hanging on the hook by the window. Little details. Easy to miss if you are not looking. Very hard to ignore once you are. Jake looks at Harold again. The old man turns from the fireplace and meets his eyes. Everything okay? Harold asks, and Jake smiles and says yes, everything is fine. But inside his head, one question is getting louder and louder. Who else is in this cabin? Jake decides to just ask, directly. Because sitting there pretending everything is normal while someone is possibly breathing behind a closed door feels worse than the awkwardness of asking. He clears his throat. Harold, he says, I hope this is not rude, but is there someone else here with you? Harold looks at him for a long moment. Not surprised, not defensive, just measuring, like he is deciding something. Then he puts down the metal rod, pulls a chair over from near the wall, and sits down across from them. He folds his hands on the table, and he says, yes, my son is here. Jake waits, Carlos waits, neither of them says anything. Harold is quiet for a moment, looking at his hands. Then he starts talking. His name is Daniel. He is 36 years old. About 8 months ago, Daniel showed up at the cabin. No warning, no phone call. Harold did not even have a working phone out here. Daniel just appeared at the door one evening, bag over his shoulder, looking like he had not slept in days. Harold had not seen his son in almost 4 years. They had not had a falling out exactly, just distance. Daniel lived in Phoenix. He had a job, an apartment, a whole life. They talked maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Christmas, birthdays. You know how it goes sometimes with grown kids. But that evening, 8 months ago, Daniel stood on his father's porch and said, Dad, I need to disappear for a while. Can I stay here? Harold did not ask questions. He just opened the door. Over the following weeks, the story came out in pieces. Daniel had been working for a mid-sized financial company in Phoenix. He had discovered that some of the senior people at the company were moving money in ways that were not exactly legal. He did not go looking for this information. He just came across it by accident while doing his regular work. And once he saw it, he could not unsee it. He reported it internally first to his manager. His manager told him to forget about it. He went higher, same answer. And then things at work started getting uncomfortable. His projects were reassigned. His access to certain systems was removed. People who used to be friendly suddenly were not. Daniel got scared. He hired a lawyer. The lawyer told him he had options. He could go to the authorities, become a formal whistleblower. But that process takes time, months, sometimes years. And in the meantime, Daniel felt watched. He felt unsafe in his own apartment, so he came to the one place he thought no one would think to look. A small wooden cabin in the Colorado mountains where his retired father lives without internet or phone or neighbors for miles around. Harold pauses, looks up at Jake and Carlos. "He is safe here," Harold says quietly, "and I would like to keep it that way." The room is completely silent except for the sound of the fire. Jake does not know what to say. He looks at Carlos, Carlos looks at him, and for a moment, neither of them moves. Because here is the thing. They are two random hikers. They wandered into this situation completely by accident. A dead flashlight, a wrong turn in the dark, and suddenly they are sitting in a cabin knowing something that very few people in the world know. That Daniel is here, that he is hiding, that his father has been protecting him for 8 months in total silence. And now Harold is looking at them across that small wooden table, waiting. Jake speaks first. He says, "We are not going to tell anyone. I want you to know that right now. Whatever is happening with your son, that is not our business. You helped Carlos. You came to find me. We owe you, not the other way around." Harold holds his gaze for a long moment. Then he nods just once. And something in his face relaxes, something that had been tight and careful the whole time they had been there. And that is when the back door opens. Daniel walks out. He is exactly like the photo on the wall, dark hair, maybe mid-30s, but he looks tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time. He is wearing a gray sweater and socks, holding a cup of coffee, and he stops when he sees Jake and Carlos sitting at the table. He looks at his father. Harold says, "They know, they are okay." Daniel stands there for another second. Then he pulls out a chair and sits down. And just like that, the four of them are around the table together. They talk for almost 2 hours. Daniel tells them more details, carefully, without names or specifics that could cause problems. Jake and Carlos mostly listen. At some point, Harold makes more tea and puts some bread and cheese on the table, and it feels almost normal. 4 people around a table in a mountain cabin talking. Before Jake and Carlos leave, Daniel says something that stays with Jake for a long time afterward. He says, "I used to think doing the right thing was simple. You see something wrong, you say something. That is it. But it turns out the right thing can cost you everything. Your job, your home, your sense of safety. And you still have to do it. Because if you do not, you become part of the problem." Jake shakes his hand. Carlos shakes his hand. Harold walks them to the door. "Stay on the main trail," Harold says, "and charge your flashlight batteries before your next trip." Carlos laughs, a real warm laugh. "Yes, sir," he says. They hike back through the trees. The sun is high now, the mountains bright and still. And Jake says that the whole way back to camp, he kept thinking about Harold, about what it means to love someone so quietly, so completely, that you give up your own peace to protect theirs. No questions asked, just come in. You are safe here. Sometimes lonely is safer than the alternative. He finally understood what that meant. So, that is the story of Jake, Carlos, Harold, and a flashlight with dead batteries. And I keep coming back to this question. What would you do if you were Jake sitting at that table hearing Harold explain why his son is hiding in the mountains? Would you ask more questions? Would you feel uncomfortable? Would you want to leave as fast as possible and pretend you never heard any of it? I think most of us would like to believe we would do exactly what Jake did. Look the man in the eyes and say, "This is not our business," and we are not going to say a word. But honestly, that kind of response takes something. It takes trust. It takes a quick decision about what kind of person you want to be in that moment. And the thing is, Jake did not have time to think about it for very long. He just knew. Some things you know without needing to think. I also keep thinking about Daniel, about what it is like to do the right thing and have it cost you so much. His career, his apartment, his normal life, all of it gone, at least for now. Living in a cabin with no internet. Hiding from people who probably wish he had just stayed quiet. And still believing it was worth it. That is a kind of courage that does not look dramatic from the outside. It does not look like a movie. It looks like a tired man in a gray sweater, drinking coffee at a small wooden table. But it is real, and it is rare. And Harold. Can we talk about Harold for a second? This man has been living alone in the mountains for years. He built a quiet life for himself, hunting, cutting wood, no neighbors, no noise. And then his son shows up at the door, scared and exhausted, and Harold does not hesitate for even a moment. He just opens the door. He rearranges his whole life, his whole sense of safety, without a single complaint. Sometimes lonely is safer than the alternative, he said. And I think what he meant was, being alone is something I chose for myself. It is peaceful. It is mine. But if my son needs me, none of that matters anymore. For him, I will take the risk. For him, I will open the door every single time. That line, it gets me every time I think about it. Okay, before I let you go, I want to say thank you. Genuinely. Thank you for spending this time with me and with this story. If this podcast made you feel something, made you think about something, made you want to call someone you love, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. If you are learning English and this episode helped you, that makes me so happy. Come back for more. We have new episodes every week, and every single one is designed to help you improve your English while actually enjoying the process. And if you like today's story, please hit that like button, subscribe if you have not already, share this episode with someone who would appreciate it. It takes about 5 seconds, and it means the world to us. I am Sarah, this is Ginger English, and I will see you in the next one.